All right, what's going on, guys? So in this video, I'm going to be covering how to play Division One golf step by step. This is going to be a complete guide video. This might be one of the longer videos. We'll have to see how this ends up. My goal in this video is to make things as streamlined and as step by step for you as possible, so that you, in theory, could go ahead, watch this video, implement the stuff that I'm about to talk about, and at least set yourself up or your child up for a high probability of being able to play Division One golf. If you're new to the channel, this is all we talk about, is how to help junior golfers develop to play Division One golf. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. We got another good one for you. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. So the first thing you need to wrap your head around if you want to help your child play Division One golf is rankings. This is something that most families do not take seriously at all. They think that it's unnecessary or something, or maybe they just don't even know that it exists. So I'm going to put you guys on some game here. So the first thing you want to do is go to juniorgolfscoreboard.com. And you want to go to this page, Rankings and Honors College Signings. And you're able to filter by boys or girls. So whether you got boy, girl, whatever, doesn't matter. These principles are still exactly the same. It's one of the most common questions I get asked is, is it different for boys or girls? Pretty much the same thing. Slight variations, but for the most part, same general concept. All the way back to 2017, it'll show you which players got recruited and where they're ranked in their class and what their scoring differential was. Now, for the purpose of this video, you just need to understand scoring differential. It's kind of like a way of showing how you perform versus the difficulty of the tournament or the golf course you're playing on. So, for example, if you had two players who shoot even par, but one plays at 6,000 yards and one plays at 7,000 yards, obviously the player who does it at 7,000 yards is a significantly better golfer, right? And so that's all of this is showing. Now, technically, this is only showing the top 75% of your rounds. So one of the common things that I see that freaks people out is their child goes out there and shoots a bad round of golf or a bad tournament, and they think that's the end of the world. And the reality is that that's just not true. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail here. But we're only looking at the top 75% of your rounds. So if it is truly terrible, it will not count on your overall scoring differential. But anyway, the big picture here is so that when you say, hey, or your child says, hey, I want to play Division One golf, you actually have a target. It's not just kind of this vague thing of like, oh, I need to go out and, get connections with coaches, or I need to go to camps, or I need to, go win a tournament. That's what I thought when I was a junior golfer. And it was pretty dumb, to be honest. So, but a lot of people have that. And so I want to make sure that you guys have this clarity here. So you just want to be able to know, like, if you're trying to play at a particular program, you have the access to the information right here. You don't even have to sign up. It's completely free. Or if you just want to play general Division One, you're just like, hey, I want to play Division One golf. I don't really know, a particular program I want to play at. -2 is a really good benchmark to kind of shoot for, especially for boys. For girls, you might be able to get away with -1 or -1.5. For boys, it's just a little bit more competitive because there's more boys that play, junior golf in general. So anyway, that's kind of foundation number one. We've got to know kind of where our leaderboard is, what we're tracking. If you want to go to Harvard, you got to know what your GPA is. You got to know your standardized test scores. Same thing's true for playing Division One golf. You need to know where your scoring differential is at, where your ranking's at, and scoring differential is really the thing to focus on. Ranking is just kind of a byproduct of that. It's how you're doing versus the other players. That's not a number you want to put a lot of stock in, because if you're thinking about the stuff when you should be, which is realistically from 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, where we have a decent amount of runway before we're actually getting recruited. Recruiting starts sophomore year, June 15th. We want to make sure that you have a little bit of runway there. There's not as many players who are going to be ranked at 12, which is an advantage. Obviously, you don't have as steep a competition. And it also just puts you in a position where you don't want to put too much stock in, like, oh, I'm ranked 50th in the country. It's like, it doesn't really matter that much. There's going to be other kids who are going to come in. You just want to make sure that you're consistently improving. Biggest thing I can say that also helps with kind of like the mental health of golf is just, trying to focus on your own game. Trying to get a little bit better every single day. Obviously, there's like ups and downs, right? But if you apply the stuff I'm going to be talking about in this video, then the ups and downs are going to be much more mild. So anyway, and you're going to have some tools on kind of like buffering that stuff out so perceptually that it's easier for the player. So anyway, that's that. The second question that you should be asking, right, is how do I get ranked, right? You might be watching this video and you already have your junior golfer is ranked. Congratulations, you're ahead of the game. But you might be asking yourself that question. So I'll just cover that very simply. Same thing. Tournaments and results on Junior Golf Scoreboard. Go to search for tournaments, and then you can just search, whatever month or realistically any. Just search your state, and go ahead and mark the year for the tournaments that are available that are ranked. And you'll just do the whole I'm not a robot thing. They'll just show you every single tournament in your state that's ranked. You don't necessarily want to always take tournaments a tournament at their word for, oh, hey, yeah, this gets junior golf scoreboard points. And most of the time it does, but to be fair, sometimes it doesn't. And you don't want to get confused by something like that. To be clear, you need to have 4 tournaments of at least 36 holes to be ranked. So if one of those rounds of golf gets cut off, let's say you have bad weather or something like that, then it won't count. You'll have to play in another tournament. But long story short, you just need to play in those 5 rounds so that you can be ranked. And then what we're going to be able to do is really where I don't know if I'd call it secret sauce, but it's kind of the next layer to this, is you're going to have your target, right? Let's just say it's -2 for the sake of simplicity. And you're going to have wherever you're at, wherever your child's at, right? They're going to have a scoring differential. And then you're going to be able to say, okay, cool. We're 12 years old right now, and we want to be at -2 by the time we're 16. So we got 4 years ahead of us, maybe a little bit less. But let's just say for easy math, we got 4 years ahead of us, and we need to improve by this many shots. Now, I can tell you just from having researched extensively on Junior Golf Scoreboard, the average player improves by about 1.19 shots per year. So if you're doing this, just take out your handy dandy calculator and take 1.19 times the number of years your child has until they're about 16 years old, or whenever the kind of end of their sophomore year would be going into their junior year. If they're able to get to -2 with that improvement, then you're probably good to go, probably good to do just whatever the normal thing is. That said, when I work with players in my coaching program, they improve by an average of 3.6 shots per year. And so again, you can pull out your handy dandy calculator and multiply 3.6 by the number of years, and your child might be in a better spot as a result of that. So if you feel like they're a little bit behind, don't worry about that. There are people out here who can help for that particular thing. I've got a link below in the description if that's something you're interested in. Long story short, what we do is everything that's in this video, but more specifically, we help your child track their stats so they know which stats they're tracking and how to track those stats. Show them how to practice and actually use that information in their on-course strategy, their mindset, and actually just like knowing what to do when they're out there practicing so they're not just doing a bunch of random stuff. We update that practice every 10 rounds so that way it stays up to date. And we give them ongoing coaching as far as just the day-to-day stuff that comes up throughout the week. Questions that come up, they'll have that support, and that way they're able to consistently improve. It's a very different kind of approach than most people just go to their coach and try and work on their swing and hope things get better. My process is very data driven, and so if you're into that type of thing, I really encourage you check out the link in the description to learn more about that. Anyway, back to the video. So we've got our target, we got where we're at, and we've got where we want to get to, right? Like we've got those 2 variables. Now, how do we go about doing that? Well, let's go ahead and I'll pull up one of the students that I'm working with just as an example so you guys can see this. So Moses, in this case, I want to say Moses is 13, but we can see his scoring average and we can see all the tournaments that he's played in over this past year. And we can see his current scoring differential. We started working together in July. So he started off with a scoring differential of 8.15. Now we're down to about 5.3. I would say Moses is maybe overperforming a little bit on kind of like what my normal student is, but not by a ton. I would say he's kind of on normal pace where he's probably going to improve by about 3.5, 4 shots over our kind of time working together. And hopefully we continue to do that in the future. Anyway, this just kind of like show you guys the overall trends here. The thing we've got here is we've got the difficulty of the tournaments, which you guys will notice post July or starting work together, the tournaments get longer, right? So here, he's had some events that are already scheduled. We started working together end of July here. So August, we had 1 more. Tournaments get longer. And so as a result of that, that's part of why his scoring differential has gone down. Because he's shooting pretty much the same scores, but on harder golf courses, right? And even this last one is fantastic because he literally broke his leg, came back, fires a 71 on a long golf course. I mean, can't ask for more than that. Like, it's pretty sick. Anyway, so we got that, and we got a scoring average. We started working together. His scoring average, I want to say it was about 77-ish. Maybe it was closer to 78. We'll take a look at that in a second. But we've been able to bring the scoring average down, and we've been able to make the golf courses longer. A big part of that was being able to track his statistics and being able to see, okay, cool, well, if we make the golf course longer, what's going to happen to our approach shots, right? Because that's really the punishment that happens. If you play a longer golf course, you have longer approach shots coming in, so you need to know, like, how often do I hit the green from these different distances, right? So, for example, if from 75 to 100 yards, you hit the green, let's say 80% of the time, and I move you back to your average approach shot now is not 75 to 100, it's 125 to 150 yards, but you still hit the green 70% of the time. you're not actually going to be punished really as far as like playing a longer golf course. It's not really going to matter for you. And if you're going to play that longer golf course, let's say it is, drops off to 50%. Guess what we're going to be doing in our practice? We're going to really double down on making sure that we have that skill set so that when we're out on the golf course, that doesn't hurt our scoring, right? We're focusing on the right areas. And this is one of the things that I think that most people don't really get with junior golf specifically. And I've had the opportunity to really be around a lot of guys who teach on the PGA Tour, teach very high level players, and obviously just you're kind of like run-of-the-mill golf coach who works with everyone that comes by. They've got their 80-year-old and they've got their junior golfer and everything in between, right? And one of the things that I find that gets overlooked is for a junior golfer, a lot of these skills are still being developed, right? So for example, a PGA Tour player can take the advice of like push the ball as close to the green as possible on, like, let's say a par 5, because a PGA Tour player tends to be have developed a lot of skills, like they can hit a 40-yard pitch shot on the green reasonably well, 30-yard pitch shot on the green. I don't know how long you've been watching junior golf, but I'm sure you've seen plenty of junior golfers lay the sod over it or blade it over the green from 40 yards. And so there's an advantage for that player to just know and be like, hey, I'm going to develop a skill at some point. But right now, let's just go ahead and lay up to 7,500 yards, get myself a full wedge, and keep things easier for me. Because I got other responsibilities. I got to do well in school. I have a limited amount of time that I can practice golf. I'm not a professional golfer where I can have all the skills and have the TrackMan and everything. So I need to keep things easy for me. And they're really just not losing that many shots by laying up. In the same sense, a lot of the time for junior golfers, a lot of emphasis around like putting instruction tends to be on like mechanical stuff, because again, the best players in the world, they're not bad at all the other stuff. They need to like have better mechanics, right? But a junior golfer needs to spend a lot of time on speed and making their very short putts. I'd say anything inside 5 feet. That way that they're just not 3-putting. Well, those things, there's a reason that those things are not taught, is because most people aren't looking at the data and saying, oh, wow, this junior golfer that I'm working with, they 3-putt 15% of the time. Like, we just brought that down. That'd be very easy to do. It wouldn't take a lot of effort. And a lot of the time it's just knowing that and being able to follow those statistics, which is what I do with all my students. That's a big part of why they're able to improve as fast as they do, because they're not just working on mechanics. They're actually working on developing those scoring skills. And also, to be clear, I said earlier, the average player improves by 1.19 shots per year. Most of that is because the player is hitting the ball further. There's only about 0.25 shots of that's actually the scoring average going down. The majority of that is just because the player ends up hitting it further over time. So they play longer golf courses, and that's where the technical improvement comes from. So if you really want to bring down scores, you have to understand how all these pieces fit together, and then you have to be strategic about knocking those things down. And that's one of the things that'll happen, where you have a player who's 12 and they'll jump up to playing longer golf courses. Maybe they're playing 5,500 for boys, and they go to like 6,500 and just start trying to play in AJGAs, and all of a sudden they're shooting bad scores. And it's like, you're not actually a worse golfer. You're just being exposed for skills that you didn't have, right? And we just need to make sure that if we were going to make that jump, we knew, oh, hey, I'm going to need to start developing these skills. What do I need to do specifically in order to make that happen? So anyway, continuing on with the video, these are the two big variables. We want to bring scoring average down. We want to make the tournaments hurt. Pretty simple. Now, I can't just tell you, hey, make the scoring average go down. Yeah, thanks. Everyone's trying to do that, right? Everyone has in their head, be like, oh, well, I should shoot par, I should shoot, 69 or whatever. That's not really the way to think about this. What we want to do is focus on what's the scoring average and what are the big statistics that go into causing that scoring average, right? I see people talk about strokes gained, which is, again, fantastic if you're a PGA Tour player, but it's not as helpful if you're a junior golfer. Why do I say that? Let's look at off the tee, right? Off the tee, you're a junior golfer, you're probably losing like 7 shots off the tee because you hit it 240 off the tee instead of 300. Like, it's not helpful. But we want to be able to track something like penalty rate. Penalty rate's very important. It has a major impact on how you're going to score. Something like hitting the ball in the fairway versus the rough doesn't really matter that much at all. Just to be completely transparent here, most junior golfers, I would even say at least half of the junior golfers I work with, and I've seen their data for, they're as good out of the rough, if not better, as far as hitting the green than they are from the fairway. So, sometimes that changes. I would say it's maybe a little bit more biased toward boys than girls, but, thankfully girls hit the fairway a lot more often because they're not hitting it so far. Anyway, I digress a little bit there. The point is, we want to know what are the big variables that we need to focus on, right? So in order to do that, we need to track your statistics. And we need to be able to segregate those statistics between tournaments and practice. And we need to be able to look at real amounts of data, right? If you play one round of golf or you play a tournament, that tells you like nothing, right? You need to be playing at least 5. Ideally, we're looking at 10 rounds at a time, because what will happen here is if your measurement of yourself is, oh well, I played well in this last tournament, it doesn't really do much for us. But if we can say, hey, these are my last 10 rounds, I just played a good one, I had a good one drop off, or I just played a bad one, had a bad one drop off, or I had a couple of bad ones, but my overall average is improving. That's really the thing we want to look at, and it kind of improves the mental health to just say like, okay, where am I at? Is this kind of slowly, incrementally moving toward my target? Rather than saying like, how do I make these giant leaps? Which is a lot of the time like the goals that the junior golfers have. It's like, hey, I'm shooting 85 right now, and I think I should be shooting even par. It's like, yeah, that doesn't happen just overnight. Like you can't, even if your ball striking just like magically is like, boom, now we got elite level ball striking. It's like you can ball strike your way to like 75, but it's going to require some putting and some just like course management stuff to be able to shoot lower than that. So you have to have a comprehensive perspective on your game, and we need to have enough data to be able to make that evaluation. So my preferred tool, a tool called Draw More Circles, really recommend it. Specifically, one of the biggest things that's awesome about it is you can look at custom date ranges, which is very valuable, especially if you're in a position where, let's say the putter's not going well. We want to change out putters. Well, then we can measure, how is this improving or not improving our statistics, right? Like maybe we go from, a mallet putter to a blade putter. We feel like we've got better feel with the blade putter, right? Well, one of the things that could happen is maybe our feel does get better. Maybe our lag putting improves. But our short putts, because the center of mass is a little bit different, like the moment of inertia is a little bit different, now we start missing our short putts, right? And we want to be able to see like, okay, well, is that trade-off worth it, right? It's not just, hey, does it look good in the bag? Do I enjoy having it? It's, does this actually cause me to play better or worse, and by how much? We need to be able to measure these things so we can make intelligent decisions about what we should do next, right? So anyway, like I said, we also want to be able to segment out tournaments and practice. So again, if we have a gap between these, so it's like, hey, we play really good in practice, but I struggle in tournaments. It's like, why? What broke? We need to know that information, because if you just say, hey, playing really good in practice, I don't really hit any balls out of bounds, but I get into tournaments, I get nervous and I struggle off the tee. It's like, okay, cool. Well, me getting your swing better and you performing better in practice off the tee tells me absolutely nothing about how we're going to do in tournaments, right? I need to be able to solve that problem in tournaments. And it gives me a lot of perspective as a coach to be like, okay, cool, here's where I need to focus. These are the questions that I need to ask. I'm not going to go through every single question here because this is a YouTube video and it has to be specific to the player. That's the type of thing that you guys would get if you're working with me, directly one-on-one. Again, application below. But anyway, let's go ahead and continue on. What we're able to see here, you can see he's getting the feel back. Even within tournaments is pretty sick. There's a few statistics we want to pull, and I'll show you guys right here. This is a spreadsheet that I give to all my students. But we're tracking penalty rate, greens and regulation, scrambling, 3-putt, birdie conversion rate, and something I call compound errors. Those are the 6 statistics that I like to look at. Penalty rate, already talked about. Greens regulation tells you a ton. Mostly tells you about how often you have birdie putts and how likely you are to make bogey, essentially, because you hit more greens. I don't care how bad your 3-putting is. Better to hit the green than not. It's almost never better to miss the green. Anyone who tells you is like, oh, well, in this case, it's okay to miss it. Don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. Scrambling, it's just what happens when we do miss the green. How often should we essentially be making bogey? Because we can measure and be like, okay, well, if we're making worse than that, then we know we're compounding our error, which is where the compound errors comes from. 3-putts, just how often are we making bogey from the green? And then birdie conversion rate, when we do hit the green, how often do we make birdie? Pretty simple. And then from there, what we can do is we can play around with these variables and say, hey, well, what if I brought this down? How much am I going to improve by? And then use that to kind of essentially diagnose, be like, hey, if we can do any of these things, what's going to have the biggest impact? And then we can also consider, is that realistic? It's like greens regulation of 100% would be fantastic, but nobody can do that. There's probably a limit or an asymptote, if you will, right around 75% greens regulation. So if you get to that point, it's kind of like, okay, cool. We don't have any meat on that bone. Obviously, you can't have less than 0 penalties off the tee, so you don't have any meat on that bone once you're at that point. And it's just a way to strategically go through this and say, hey, where do I need to put the most focus? Where do I need to potentially blow things up? Because this just isn't working for me. Once we've got that, then we want to build out our practice plan. So this is the first practice plan I do with Moses here. As you guys can see, scoring average 77.3, scoring differential 8.15. And so we just strategically said, hey, what makes the most sense? What are the drills we want to be doing? Obviously, this is pretty rudimentary here, but I kind of go through which drills I want him working on, and how to do these specific drills. Again, that's something I'm going to walk through with my students, not necessarily on a video like this. But then we're going to be able to see how we improve over time. So we get to 76.63 and 6.46. We get to 76.5, 5.44, and as you guys just saw, now we're at 5.33. So again, it's not leaps and bounds. It's this incremental progress that we want to be seeing. And, if Moses stays on this track, he is a class of 2029, so he's essentially got 3-4 years ahead of him before he's getting recruited. On this track, he's going to be, more than likely a Division I player at minimum, but realistically, a very, very high level Division I player. We haven't even talked about scholarship. There's going to be a tremendous amount of just resource out there for him to be able to select and also position themselves. So if you're watching this video, specifically, I want to talk to you if your child is like kind of in the 12, 13, 14, 15 range. Like, this is the time to like really double down on this stuff. A lot of times families try and like push this out to the future, and it just creates a lot of stress. It creates a lot of anxiety, and it's just something you don't want to do. If you've got a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, you're in a really great position, especially if they're very driven, because then they're in a position where they can really set themselves up for the future, and they don't have to put hardly any pressure on themselves in order to do that. That's really the biggest thing that I can advocate for. So again, if you're looking for help in this, you want to go deeper than this process, which again, I've shown you guys is play the tournaments, play the ranked events, track your stats, lower the scoring average, be strategic about your practice, focus on the right things, model that out with data, not just, I think that this sounds like a good idea. And again, if you're a parent watching this, you don't have a background in golf, you don't know how to do any of this stuff, maybe you can kind of forward this video to your golf coach, but you're kind of confused. Again, fill out the application, and if it sounds like something you guys are interested in, again, we'll talk it over, make sure that it's a good fit for your child, because I don't take on students that I'm not confident that I can make this happen with. If your child is like, hey, I'm a junior and I have a scoring differential of 10, you're like, I can't help you. Like, I genuinely can't. But if they're in a position where it's like, hey, we got a scoring differential of like 8 or 9 and the other 12, it's like, I feel fantastic about that, because I know based on math that they just have a high probability of accomplishing their goals. That's really, that's why I'm here. That's my biggest thing on YouTube, is trying to get more of you guys, especially, 11, 12, 13, 14, to really start thinking about this ahead of time, preparing yourselves, to be in that position. And eventually everyone will come along, and then the advantage will, dissipate a little bit. But you guys are watching this video first. Big advantage to you. And so take this stuff, and if you want help, go ahead and fill out the application. I'll see you guys in the next one.